So I was asking you a question a minute ago, and was it, how do you find living up here? Surviving up here.
And what this experience has really taught me is about how to not only survive, but how to thrive. Because I have learned how little thriving I did in my life.
This is Julia Butterfly Hill, a climate activist who made major headlines in the 90s after an act of civil disobedience that drew attention to destructive logging practices in the redwood forests of California. Determined to make her point about protecting this fragile ecosystem, she spent 738 days living in a California redwood tree called Luna. She had no previous climbing or survival experience, but dedicated herself to the cause at just 23 years old. Hill's activism has inspired generations of climate activists. And now, she has inspired a musical.
I've always wanted to work with Tina Landau, and we learned that we both have this fascination and love for trees. And we're talking about this woman, Julia Butterfly Hill, who lived in a tree for over 700 days. And I found that so inspiring, this idea that a woman could do something like that.
There's something about that image of a woman in a tree that had stayed with us in a very powerful way. What would be the story of how that woman got there?
Previews for Redwood, starring Idina Menzel, first began in 2024 at the La Jolla Playhouse. The show then moved to Broadway for previews in the beginning of 2025 at the Nederlander Theater. I don't think I need to explain why at this point, but it is always a really big deal when Idina Menzel comes back to Broadway. If you are unfamiliar, she is best known for her role as Elphaba in Wicked. She is also the voice of Elsa, one of Disney's most iconic princesses. And it goes without saying that she is widely regarded as modern-day Broadway royalty. Perhaps the most interesting thing about Idina and her current relationship to Broadway is that she tends to put her focus on original stories and projects, which is rather commendable considering that she has the option to just put herself as a stunt cast in any show running here in New York City right now, or she could fund a revival of any production that she wants to, but she tends to put her energy into projects that she is passionate about, and Redwood is definitely one of those.
The reason I love doing original musicals is there's so many stories out there to be told, and I think that that's our responsibility as artists to keep seeking those stories.
I, like many other people, first heard about this show on TikTok because this clip that CBS Sunday Mornings posted of a part of her aerial performance during one of the songs that she sings in the show went semi-viral, with a lot of people asking what the show was actually about. And since that clip went viral, I have had a moderate interest in seeing this musical. One, because I've never seen Idina perform live before. Two, because everyone I know who did see it said it was very strange. And three, because the show is now closing on May 18th after it received no Tony nominations for this season. Then on Saturday, May 3rd, a perfect storm of events happened for me to be able to go see this musical in person. One, I was kind of bored because my partner Brian is currently visiting some friends in California, so I was kind of looking for something weird to do. Two, the tickets dropped to a price of $75 before the 2 p.m. matinee. And three, I posted a poll as to whether or not I should go see this musical and make content about it, and not only was the sentiment there generally positive, but Susie Toot of Drag Race Season 17 liked the tweet, and for some reason I took that as enough of a sign that I should pull the trigger on this thing. So without further ado, here is my review of Redwood the Musical. First things first, the tree doesn't sing. I was under the impression that the tree actually sings to Idina Menzel, and that is not true. The tree talks to Idina metaphorically by waving its branches. So it doesn't literally sing. This tree just called me a bitch but you can't hear it. Okay, so let me start by explaining the full plot here. Jessie, played by Idina Menzel, is a Jewish woman living in Manhattan who works at an art gallery. She is married to a woman named Mel, who is a photojournalist, and together they co-parent Jessie's son Spencer from a previous relationship. Spencer dies very suddenly and tragically, we don't know why until the end, and while Mel wants to take steps forward to process this grief, all Jessie feels like she can do is run away from her problems, and that causes a lot of strain and tension in their relationship. Jessie does end up running away to California, to the redwood forests. She meets these two researchers who are doing some work on the redwood trees. One of them is named Finn, who is this more kind of like loose, older, hippie type guy. He's got a contentious relationship with his son Mateo, who's like a teenager. And then there's Becca, who is a more uptight, passionate climate activist and researcher who is not as kind to Jessie when she sort of just crosses paths with them. After revealing that her son died and, just through her behavior, they become aware that she is clearly unable to cope with this grief, Finn decides that he's going to allow her to climb this redwood tree, even though she has no professional climbing experience, even though it is against protocol, and even though it is very dangerous and this woman is clearly mentally unstable. We learn a bit more about these other two researchers through their own songs, and we learn more about their backstories. But the main kind of through line here is that Jessie is becoming more one with this tree. She learns how to climb it. At one point, they actually let her sleep on the platform and spend the night out there, which again is insane because she is not a professional and this is very dangerous. But she's becoming one with this tree. At one point there's a sequence where the tree sort of speaks to her again in this metaphysical way where it's waving its branches, and Jessie hears that the tree's name is Stella, and her and Stella form this bond. Meanwhile, her wife Mel is like, hey, can you come back to New York so we can work through the grief of our son? And there's also flashbacks to their family life together at different points in time. You don't know what happens to him until the end, where Jessie sort of has this monologue where she confesses the whole story to Becca, who's sitting there, wanting to hear it. And we learn that Spencer was sort of this wild child, problem kid, had some trouble finding a place after college, after he moved back home. Then he moved back to Los Angeles with his friends, which is, a source of contention for all of them. And then he partied a lot and fell into the wrong crowd, and he tragically overdosed. Jessie's still hanging out in this tree. She's been there for I don't know how many days at this point, but then the researchers are like, hey, we have an emergency situation that we're dealing with here. We gotta get you down, and this is the big climax of the show. The climax here also, it makes no sense because the researchers are like, hey, Jessie, we can't let you hang out up here anymore because there's a fire coming. You have to get out of the fire. We're gonna come back and get you in an hour. And she's like, okay, I guess. And then I guess they can't get to her in a way that's not really explained. And the older guy is like, I have to save her. And the younger researcher, Becca, is like, no, you just need to let her work her shit out up there. Go home and be with your son during the fire. And then she starts, singing during the fire. There's flame projections all around her. And then, after that, she goes to meet her son, I guess, in this in-between space. It's not really implied if it's heaven or a dream state. And I guess she just waits out the fire up there alone. Again, not a professional climber, no professional climbing experience, just some random lady vibing it out. But this experience gives Jessie closure. Then after, she's back safe on the ground, she calls Mel and she's like, hello, I would like to talk about Spencer. I would like to try being your wife again and not run away from my problems. And that's kind of the end. Everything about this show is really bizarre, but I guess I'll just start with the fact that the plot is not much of a plot at all. And the way that it chooses to unravel this story about grief doesn't really give the audience anywhere to go for most of it until you really understand the full gravity of the situation and what happened to Jessie's son at the very end. And I guess that makes sense because in a normal format like that, I feel like the book would be more sort of dedicated to revealing that slowly, but we just kind of get it all in a truth-telling moment at the end. But because we don't really learn anything about Jessie or any of what this experience was like, I feel like at certain points, the narrative spins its wheels with all of the metaphors and lessons you can take away from a general grief experience without articulating what specifically happened to this character and this person. Dude, oh my god, I'm not gonna show it, but I am just kind of like in the park right now, and there's a dead pigeon, and its pigeon friend or partner is clearly freaking the fuck out and like pecking its body and making noises, and is very sad, and I feel really horrible. I don't know what to do. I'm watching pigeon grief right now, and it's making me really upset. I feel like the plot is also loosely connected by whatever tree metaphors they can make. For example, there's a part where Jessie and the two researchers are arguing over whether or not she's allowed to climb the tree again, or sleep in the tree or whatever. And all of a sudden, the one kind of older, like, hippie-ish guy stops and is like, okay, but do you know how the roots of the redwood tree work? And Jessie's like, surely they must be really deep. And he's like, no, they're actually not that deep, but they connect with other roots in the ecosystem. So they all work together and communicate. And that's what we have to do. We have to work together and communicate. The music also reminded me of what I would imagine they play at mega churches. It's definitely not a kitschy, camp, or classic musical theater score. It is certainly more contemporary and pop influenced, which I think a lot of new musicals are. But none of the songs are really that memorable, and it all sounds very samey, and it almost feels like there should be lyrics that are more faith or divine inspired just by like how the score goes, but there's kind of none of that besides a couple references to Judaism here and there because Idina's character is Jewish. But yeah, the music is this contemporary style that I have come to despise. It's very uninspired and half-hearted, and the plot is a little all over the place. So now I want to talk more about the practical stuff. This musical is an hour and 45 minutes without an intermission. Jail. I think most musicals are too long anyway. I don't think that's an issue exclusive to this show. I think every show that I've seen within like the last 3 years, I could make a case for almost all of them where it's like, that would have been a lot better if it was like 15 to 20 minutes shorter. But it's crazy that this show does not have an intermission. In fact, when I got out of the show, that's what most people said. They were like, I enjoyed it, but I don't understand why there was not a break in between. Also, I feel like the set design here, while impressive, is a bit disjointed and leads to an overall more disjointed tone of the whole show. So for example, there's obviously this big sort of practical, giant tree in the middle of the stage that turns on and off, and the characters can actually climb it and harness onto it, and in some scenes they literally go all the way up, which was kind of cool to see, like they literally disappear above the stage. But then the rest of the stage is covered in these giant LED panels, and I think the last time I made a Broadway adjacent video, I said that Broadway is in the pocket of big turntable. Broadway is now in the pocket of big LED panels. And don't get me wrong, the projections that they do on the panels are very impressive, but I think it almost forces the show to compete in this like modern minimalist space, whereas practical effects for the whole set would have made it feel more, grounded, less sterile, more like you're actually in nature. Because like I said, the tree is really cool. At one point, when Idina's character and her wife are arguing over Idina's issue getting over this grief, or Jessie rather, there's a table in front of them and there's very clearly nothing on the table, and they're arguing over whether or not to look at their son's photos, but there's no photos on the table. And at one point she just starts like pretending to throw them off of the table, and it's like, I think a practical addition to the set would have helped if you're trying to convey a certain emotion about that scene. I just feel like there were parts of this that wanted to be more avant-garde experimental theater, but it's wrapped in like the most sort of normal or normal attempting or seeming score and package. So it feels kind of weird and disjointed. Also, because a lot of these moments felt so samey, it felt like there were not a lot of times where the audience felt as though they were supposed to breathe or give their applause. In my theater in particular, there's this one guy who was a couple rows under me, and he was like this like big guy, and it was very funny because he would like lead the loud clap anytime Idina, even if she didn't finish the song, even if she like took a breath for a sec, and he would start loudly clapping, and then everybody else would loudly clap, but he only did that for her, even though the other characters have big songs too, but he ain't care about that. He just wanted to see Idina belt, and he wanted everybody to applaud her whenever she did. And don't get me wrong, listening to her was great. She sounded very good. It was just very funny and very wild. As far as the performances here, I mean, if you want to see Idina sing live, this has everything that you want. She's belting, she's doing crazy things with her voice, she's up in the air, she's upside down. As far as the actual characterization of Jessie, she's very, like, quirky and kind of funny, and I think she plays that off well enough. The other standouts here were Kayla Wilcoxon, who plays Becca. She has some really great comedic moments, and I think her voice is just, like, so powerful and wonderful. And Zachary Noah Pizer, who a lot of people know from Dear Evan Hansen. He only gets one song toward the end, and I think he is dramatically underutilized here. But yeah, I have no complaints about the performances themselves, and I think that while it's a very bizarre show that definitely was just shoehorned out of thin air under the concept of Idina Menzel wants to make a musical about trees, like whatever came from the however long yap session of all of the people involved in producing this, like, this is the draft of that, you know what I mean? There's nothing about it that's problematic or particularly egregious, and that's why I guess I was so confused about the amount of hate that this was receiving online when those clips first went viral. I think a lot of it is residual animosity toward Idina Menzel, because there's this whole narrative that she is frustrated that she did not get to play Elphaba in the Wicked movie and that it took so long to make a Wicked movie. I don't know where this narrative comes from. I don't really care to find out, in all honesty. But the way that people have been talking about this show online sort of makes me feel like they wish there was some sort of problematic aspect to it that they could actually go overboard on the hate campaign with, but there really isn't. And I, for one, again, want to commend Idina Menzel, because maybe all of the shows that she picks from here on out and will be involved in are not going to be some crazy caliber performance. Maybe they are all going to be in, like, the New York, Long Island Jewish mom demographic. But I hope that she doesn't stop taking these swings, because as a Broadway star of her caliber, somebody has to. In the world of $800 Othello tickets that are only priced that way due to stunt casting, I'll respect a weird little musical about trees over unnecessary, overpriced revival stunt casting any day of the goddamn week. I want to end this video with a recommendation, as I do for most of my review videos. If you are in the New York City area and you are looking for a great play, you should check out John Proctor is the Villain. I saw it a few weeks ago, and I thought it was really great. One of the best things that I've seen on Broadway in a very long time. Sadie Sink is currently nominated for a Tony Award. The play is also nominated for Best Original Play. It's really great. Let me know what your favorite piece of theater you've ever seen is down in the comments below, and if you're not a theater person, let me know what your favorite tree is. Thanks so much. See you next time.